The world normally runs on a predictable set of rules: power, status, and external compliance. But Jesus begins his kingdom on a different foundation. Out on a rocky hillside, isolated from everyone, he spends the entire night in an agonizing, continuous state of prayer. Luke records that he spent the entire night continuously in prayer to God. In the portrait of his life, these long, solitary stretches in places much like this olive grove are the source from which everything else flows, the communion required before every major turning point. When dawn breaks, he gathers his followers and chooses exactly 12 men to be his commissioned apostles. In the Jewish imagination, 12 is the most theologically loaded number possible, representing the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 sons of Jacob. By selecting this specific number, he is constituting a new Israel around himself. This timeline of first-century Jewish political factions shows just how volatile this group is. On the extreme right, you have men like Matthew, a tax collector actively working for the occupying Roman Empire. But then Jesus places him in the exact same inner circle as Simon the Zealot, a violent nationalist rebel on the extreme opposite end. Putting these two men in the same community, under the same call, is an explosive combination. Down below, a massive, mixed crowd has gathered from all over the region. Looking out across the vast green valleys of Galilee, thousands are waiting, desperate to know what the rules of this strange new community are going to be. Before he even utters a single word of teaching, Jesus has already upended the societal order. He has built a highly unstable inner circle, held together by nothing except his absolute authority over them. When he finally sits down to teach, he doesn't hand them a checklist of moral demands. He opens with a declaration of unmerited grace. He looks at the people society pities most: the poor in spirit, the mourning, those who know they are spiritually bankrupt, and tells them that the kingdom of heaven belongs to them right now, not in the future, but presently, in their emptiness. He then tells this ragged crowd, "You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world." He doesn't tell them to try to become salt or light. In this kingdom, identity comes before behavior. The underlying logic of everything Jesus is building here is that God moves towards the empty, the broken, and the excluded, rather than those who have already achieved religious status. Once that foundation of grace is set, he turns to his ethical demands, using a distinctive formula. "You have heard that it was said, but I tell you." This structure shows how he interacts with the existing law. At the surface, observable actions prohibited by tradition, like do not murder. But Jesus drops beneath the surface to address the hidden internal conditions that produce those behaviors. He says that nursing private anger subjects you to judgment, and looking with lust is adultery in the heart. The true battlefield is the mind. This internal standard dismantles the rigorous system built by the Pharisees, which relied entirely on observable, measurable piety to prove who was righteous. You can't fake this kind of righteousness with good outward behavior. It requires the inner life to be rebuilt from the ground up. All of this builds to the most demanding command of the entire sermon. He tells the crowd, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." He isn't talking about a warm emotional feeling or a passive submission to abuse. In his teaching, love is a chosen direction of the will. It means actively pursuing the good of someone who has harmed you. This graphic of rain and sun falling equally on two different people illustrates his theological reasoning. He explains that the Father causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Citizens of the kingdom must love indiscriminately, because that is exactly how God extends his generosity. He then mandates that the pillars of religious practice, giving, praying, and fasting, must be stripped of all public performance and done in absolute secrecy. To guide this hidden life, he provides what we call the Lord's Prayer, a compact, structured map designed to anchor their secret communion with the Father. The goal of a kingdom citizen is to perform solely for an audience of one. All desire for human approval and social status has to be completely abandoned. As he brings his teaching to a close, Jesus deliberately refuses to let the audience just walk away admiring his philosophy. He tells a final parable about two men building houses. One builds on rock, the other on sand. but both are about to face the same massive storm. He promises that torrential rain, rising floods, and fierce winds are coming for everyone. The crux of the parable is that survival has nothing to do with listening to his teaching. It relies entirely on doing it. Hearing his words without putting them into practice is catastrophic sand. When he finally finishes speaking, the crowd is stunned. They aren't just moved by the poetry of his words. They are astonished by his authority. Unlike the rabbis of his day, he didn't cite an outside text or appeal to an older tradition to back up his claims. He spoke as the author of the law itself. This teaching is an urgent ultimatum. It demands that human life be dismantled and rebuilt on his authority alone. But the moment Jesus steps down from the mountain, that authority is immediately challenged. An officer of the occupying Roman army blocks his path.